Hello, everybody, and welcome to Crossing the Line with Greg Heym and Scott Nadler this week, my good buddy from CrossCountry Mortgage. How you doing, my friend?
I am fantastic, Greg. It's good to be back.
I actually believe that. Somehow you look tan, even though it's freezing here this morning.
I don't think I'm tan, but I was at a wedding this past weekend.
So spray tan?
On Long Island, maybe. Yeah.
Where were you in Long Island that you didn't hit me up?
Old Westbury.
That's close enough to where I live.
Yeah.
You could have bought me lunch
You
or
could
something.
have snuck into this wedding. There were 500 people, an Italian and a Jew.
Okay.
A lot of hand gestures, a lot of opinions.
A lot of hugging, maybe.
A lot of hugging.
Okay.
Yeah. A lot of self-deprecating jokes.
Well, I am half Italian and Sicilian, so I do know what goes on at Italian weddings, and usually is a lot of fun.
Yeah. They did the horror into like Andrea Bocelli. It was
Okay.
good.
You know, you got to break out all those standards
Yeah.
for every ethnicity. That's what makes weddings so much fun, because you don't do that any other time.
Right.
Well, that's great. I had a good weekend, a couple of gigs, crazy one yesterday at the end of the St. Patrick's Day parade. We almost had an incident where our equipment almost got knocked over because the bar was so packed. But then things calmed down and we had a
You packed the bar.
Well, the parade did. I
Well.
like to think it was me, but it was a lot of fun. It's one of those ones you get to play loud because it's a pub. Restaurants, you always got to watch that. And I took my son to the St. John's game on Saturday. First time in 40 years, outright first place in the Big East, looking really good.
It's about time.
About as good as Patino's white suit. We're all going to wear white suits now. If it's good luck. No, probably not.
I don't know if I could pull that off.
I think you could pull it off.
I feel like you
almost
could.
Style. No, stop. You keep saying things like that
You
just
need
'cause
like
you
a
don't
top
wanna do
hat.
it.
Like, I think you could do it.
Well,
A cane, maybe?
okay. The cane's going to come eventually anyway. I've already had a hip replaced and probably need a knee replacement.
For
so-
style.
Just for style.
Yeah.
A nice walking stick kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. As we mentioned, it's cold today. Really cold.
What is going on?
It's like third winter, my son said. That's a new thing now. It's March 3rd. So today's 3/3. So. And it's National Cold Cuts Day. It's also National Anthem Day, but that seems kind of weird. To have
Favorite cold cut?
roast beef.
It's a good one.
You got one? I like honey maple turkey. I mean, then you find out that these things you thought were wholesome lunches are terrible for you with the preservatives. And it's like, well, what's left?
I know.
You know, the bowl of fresh vegetables. Like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
tofu. Thanks. That's Ray. We got Lena here as always. And as always, coming to you from beautiful Studio 1873, decorated by our buds at the Everset.
This beautiful set here at Studio 1873 is brought to you by the Everset. The Everset provides full-service staging and furniture rental solutions in the New York area. For more information, please visit us at staging.theeverset.com or email us at staging@theeverset.com to request a free proposal.
All right, Scott. It wasn't the happiest week for economic data.
Well, thank goodness February is a short month.
I know. February made me quiver with every paper I deliver. That's a line from American Pie.
Yeah, it is.
And it's also my birthday month, so it's got that going for it, which is nice. And it wasn't leap year. And stocks were down in February, so we want to forget that. It was enough to make you a little sad because you want to see the economy doing well and you start to hear things. And we had another inversion of the yield curve. Maybe we'll get into that later. I don't get too technical about it to start off the show. But the one thing to take away from this, and we'll talk about some of the more individual points, is remember, this is what we kind of want for you home buyers out there in particular, because as more signs, retail sales slowing down, we got PCE, that their line on spending was also negative for January. We're seeing jobless claims tick up a little bit, although they're still low, but they're going up. That's what we need to get inflation down eventually and to get rates down. And if you're watching the 10-year, which the Treasury Secretary is all about, it's coming down.
Right.
And it's taking mortgage rates with it. It hasn't translated into a, frenzy of activity, but you want to blame on the harsh weather, the fact that prices are still high. So this episode, we're going to focus on the challenges, what we're facing, because there's a lot going on. People always feel that they're overwhelmed by things. We're going to talk about what's on our minds and try to give you some advice on how to survive them that doesn't involve drinking or other vices. We'll try to get something a little more concrete. Do you come to an economist for motivational advice? Probably not. But Scott's better at this stuff anyway. You know,
I wouldn't say that. I come to you for more than just motivation, Greg.
Free mugs?
The mugs are fantastic. Yes. Yeah, they're good.
Okay.
We can't disclose what's in the mugs, but the mugs themselves are great.
They are. I always wanted a mug with my name on it. It's cool.
You got it.
Well,
Dreams do come true.
You know, every now and then you get a moment.
Yeah.
So it's fun. All right. So, you know, the big news again, PCE, personal consumption expenditures, price index, the core version, which excludes food and energy prices, 2.6% year over year. That's down from a revised 2.9% the month before. So that's progress, but 2.6 is not 2, right? And it's not going to be 2 for a while. Rate cuts on hold. I know a lot of us want that. But remember, and this we're going to talk about tariffs too, and the rate cuts and tariffs have one thing in common. They say an amount, 25% tariffs or 25 basis point cut, but it doesn't work that way. You know, we talked before that credit card rates didn't come down with any significance after a percentage of cuts last year. So I think we have to separate fact from fiction and, you know, what may happen versus what actually happens and try to get a little clarity on that too. We mentioned that consumer spending was down in January. And also there was a huge surge in imports, probably due to the pending tariff threats because they haven't been enacted, which may take place this week or may be adjusted. We'll tune in and see. You add that up, less spending, more imports. Remember, the formula for GDP is consumption plus government spending plus investment plus net exports. And if everybody's rushing to import stuff here, you're looking at a negative 1.5% growth rate in the economy for the first quarter, according to the Atlanta Fed. Now, GDP now is not always right. It's going to be revised. It just goes to show you Friday's jobs report is going to be as huge as it always is. It's going to be huge because it can either calm people down or, you know, stoke the fear.
Right.
Now, how are you finding the buyers that you're interacting with? Because we also saw consumer confidence had a huge decline, biggest decline since 2021. They're worried about the future. They're okay with the now. How does that impact what you see when you talk to people looking to make a big purchase?
Clients are staying in the game right now. Again, I think we touched on this a little bit last week in terms of the lack of volatility and the fact that rates are trending downward is keeping people in the game. But going back to what you were talking about earlier, the Fed, they raised rates at a historic pace, and this is why they did it, to slow things down. And it takes time for the rate hikes to make their way through the economy. And vice versa, the rate cuts, it takes time. So we're starting to see the fruits of their labor come to fruition finally. Right. And that has been good for mortgage rates. And I think there's a lot of, for people who are in the game right now, who I'm talking to, who are actively shopping and looking at different properties, they're more optimistic because they're seeing where interest rates are. I spoke to a client last week. There are now float down opportunities too, which means if we locked a client in at a rate 30 to 60 days ago, rates are now lower. We can float that rate down. So I spoke to a client where their initial rate was at 7%. And that was almost 2 months ago.
Right.
They were excited about that 7% rate at that time.
Well, because it looked like we were going a lot higher.
Right.
Yeah. So
we just floated the rate down to 6.5%. So, you know, the goalposts have moved.
Right.
And again, I think people who are actively shopping, where we look at what their payment is, some clients still say 6.5%, that's still too high, or 6.25%. But relatively speaking to where it was, this is what we've been waiting for.
Right. And then do they...
It's a double-edged sword, though, right? Because clients that have their money invested in the market and they see their assets depleting a little bit, that doesn't feel good either.
Well, look, so far the only index that's down out of the three for the year is NASDAQ, which has been volatile. Obviously, there's been a lot of concern about AI.
But then you look at, there's a guy, very successful, who a lot of us follow. He's influential.
Is it me?
It's not you, but close.
Okay.
And it came out that he's holding on to $330 billion of cash. Of course, I'm talking about Warren Buffett. And when someone like Warren Buffett does something, people react to it and people follow him. So seeing someone like that who is known for investing in the markets and picking stocks, now he's saying he's sitting on cash, people follow that.
Yeah. Well, I think, there is a lot to be worried about. And, the consumer spending, obviously, again, it's 70% of GDP. So we want to know what's on their minds. And it's good that you can still feel comfortable now. I mean, wages are still rising faster than prices. Hiring is still pretty robust. Unemployment claims tick up 1 week. We'll see if that continues, but it's still over 100,000 less than the average. They've been collecting the data for decades.
Right.
But again, they're hearing about tariff like all day long, and they don't know what it means. So again, I'm going to tell you what it means. There's a good article in the Wall Street Journal about this the other day, and we've said this before, but when you, let's say, I'm just going to throw a number out. Let's say a 10% tariff on Ron Guidry bobbleheads, right? Or whatever it is. Let's say wine. So Italian wine is an example they give.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to pay 10% more for that product. It never works out that way. How much of that you pay depends on the scarcity of the product. If I like Italian wines from a certain region in Tuscany, whatever, I'm going to pay it, and they know I'm going to pay it, so I'm probably paying close to the 10%. Mm-hmm. If there are alternatives to the product, let's say it's some type of rug that I can get somewhere else, then the producer will probably absorb that or most of that. Also, depending how our currency does against the currency of that country, if our currency strengthens, it becomes cheaper to us. So they actually had some good sample items. They actually contracted Moody's to do a little bit of an analysis on this. So it's kind of interesting to see. Yeah, those Italian wines you're going to pay up for. But some of the other stuff, not so much.
It's not binary.
It's about scarcity. It's like
supply
anything
and
else.
demand. Yeah, for sure.
Even with domestic goods, if you know that it's hard to get something, you can push up the pressure. And they even mentioned that, like, if washing machines get tariffed and they go up in price, the dryers tend to go up too, because they see an opportunity. It's like we make them both more expensive. That's just part of it. But tariffs do not cause inflation. They cause the price of that good to go up potentially, but that does not mean that the price of everything else goes up. Mm-hmm. In fact, you could argue that if Greg's spending more on wine, why do I keep mentioning wine? What did I do all weekend? Then he's going to spend less on others.
Correct.
Other things, because Greg only has a certain amount of money to spend. I only get a little bit of an allowance.
You're talking about wine and price fluctuations. There's a bar in Barcelona. I think it's still there. It's called Dow Jones. And they have a stock ticker at the top with the prices of every drink. So let's say no one that night bought a vodka soda. You can get a vodka soda for 10 cents. And then all of a sudden people say, oh my God, a vodka soda is 10 cents. They start buying it and the price naturally goes up. And you see how things are moving, and it's pretty fascinating. See, it's an economics lesson and a good time. The only problem is you won't remember it by the end of the night, because at 10 cents, you're going to have too many vodka sodas and it's going to be bad. Or you might be the hero and buy 30 of them for all of your friends and other people there. Right. And then all of a sudden the price. And then you got no money. Exactly. And then, but you are propping up the economy. Right. It's funny you say bar in Barcelona. It's like we put the bar in Barcelona. Yes, that's good. That's good. That should be their slogan. I leave marketing to the marketing people. tell Matt about that. Again, just remember this tariffs. Again, they're in flux. It's almost like a daily basis. We've got to see what the mood is. Maybe they won't be as much on Mexico and Canada. China's threatened to retaliate. It's all posturing right now. We'll see what happens. But remember, tariffs are not a new thing. And when the last time this administration did tariffs, the inflation rate was under 2%. So the thing that causes the worst level of inflation is when you print way too much money. It's that simple. And we just went through that. You raise the money supply by 40%, you get the highest inflation in 40 years. As long as we don't send mass amounts of money to people, which is something being floated out there in the term of like Doge rebates, I think that's a bad idea, because you're just
putting gasoline on a fire that's already there. Like you said, let the process work. Let's stop touching rates because, right as we always say 6 months to a year for every rate move to have any influence. You're going to start to see that influence of the cuts in the coming months that we did get last year. And then we'll see what happens. But to keep trying to get ahead of it, they can't be ahead of it.
You mentioned Scott Bessent earlier, not by name, but following the fact that he's following the 10-year.
Right.
Once the election passed, you saw the 10-year pop up because there was a lot of optimism about what was going to happen in the economy. And then the second tariffs came into the equation where it was more talked about, you saw the 10-year start to drop because they thought that this is going to cause inflation to start to, which is really interesting. The fact that tariffs are going, the talk of tariffs causing inflation actually caused the 10-year to start to drop. Well, and it wasn't because of it, but it just so happened that way, that you saw all this inflation data come out and the 10-year has dropped quite a bit. And in turn, we're seeing mortgage rates drop.
This is what we talk about with consumer spending, right? If they're pessimistic about the future, they're not going to spend money. And then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Just like when CFOs get pessimistic, they're not going to invest, or Warren Buffett's going to sit on his cash. That's the thing. And markets react to news in light speed time. Yes. And then a whole bunch of algorithms go off and, the stock market has become pretty volatile. And it's been a rocky road so far this year. But remember, we're coming off of 2 years of 20% plus growth in stocks. And there has to be some change. And look, things are moving fast. And it's been a little over a month, since we have a new administration. So it's something that we have to keep watching. But long-term decisions should be based on long-term things. And whether it's buying a home or an investment you make or whatever you want to do, start a business, it has to be a long-term thing.
Had this conversation last night. 2 first-time home buyers. They're in their early 30s. They just had their first kid, buying a home. And they said, we're reading and seeing that rates are probably going to be lower in like December, maybe early 2026. Do you think we should wait? Because they really like this one property that they want to buy. And I said, how long do you think you're going to stay in this property for? Right. They said 10 to 15 years. So then you can't worry so much about the rates. Buy it at this price that you're comfortable with. And because if rates drop, we've talked about this before, every 1% drop in rate deems 5.5 million people eligible for a loan. So that could, for that specific property, drive that price up.
And I can tell you, someone who took a while to find the home, it's not an easy process, especially now with inventory still being so low in so many parts of the country. You shouldn't feel like I got to buy this one. But if you find one you like, that's a lot, to me, makes a lot more sense than trying to time a rate. When if rates get lower, it doesn't mean that the prices are going to go lower with them too. So you could have the reverse happen and your payment's the same. And you can change the rate afterwards. You can't change the price.
Exactly.
All right. So that's a good segment. We're gonna get into housing a little bit, but before we do that, we have a very special message from our very special friends at the very special CrossCountry Mortgage.
Your dream home is closer than you think. I'm Scott Nadler, VP of Mortgage Lending at CrossCountry Mortgage, and I'm here to get you the perfect loan to match your perfect home. From first-time home buyers to seasoned homeowners, I've helped clients make their moves with confidence. Ready for a smooth, stress-free home buying experience? Let's get you moving today. Call me and let's turn those dreams into keys.
And we're back. Man, that guy's really good looking in that ad. Jeez.
Photoshop.
How come we don't do that to me, right? Why do I look like this when I watch it back? See, my mother would say he looks just fine, but I think my mother stopped watching now. I don't know. So we talk about mortgage rates falling, and I kind of mocked it last week. So now it's 6 straight weeks. So now it's noticeable. They were just below 7. Now 6, basically 6 3/4. The hope is that with the rise in inventory that is typical this time of year, homes will get more affordable. But the January data is not good. We saw a record low in pending home sales. That's homes with signed contracts, existing homes with signed contracts that haven't closed yet. Data goes back to 2001, the lowest level ever. New home sales down sharply. They're also based on signed contracts. So it's a good sort of month ago indicator, right? Because that's when these things were signed. But you say maybe that you're seeing more confidence at least, and you feel we're going to see this pickup, now that rates have come down noticeably, and you start to hear numbers like 6.75%, 6.5%.
Yes. One metric they should chart would be how many calls mortgage bankers get on a Saturday and Sunday.
Well, why don't you do that?
We should do that.
We track open house performance. You should track Scott Nadler phone performance.
Right. Not just me.
I'll just call you to get the numbers up.
Inflate the numbers.
You're not gonna pick up if I call on a weekend. Come on.
No, I would for you, of course.
You'd say I get one of those text messages. I'm on the phone. I'll call you later. Yeah, I know.
Well, if I'm on the phone, I gotta let you know. I'm gonna call you back.
You don't have to. Well, I love when people, or they'll answer the phone. I can't talk right now. It's like, voicemail's okay. I know a lot of people don't like voicemail and tell you whatever you do, don't leave a voicemail message.
I want to hear my voice in real time.
It's the old
customer
way, the
service.
new way. Yeah.
I don't want you to guess. I don't want you to say, "Oh, is he going to take 3 days to get back to me?" I want you to know right then and there. Hey, I'm on the phone.
If you're drinking in Barcelona bars with tickers on it, I don't know where you could be. You could be any. It's like a Where's Waldo? Like where's Scott Nadler? All right, I'm sorry. So
I'm available.
We're talking about buyer optimism. So you feel like the momentum.
I'm getting.
January was horrible weather. That's another thing they
correct. It was like a 25 year low, right? Look, I'm getting a lot more calls from agents and from clients on a weekend. Update my pre-approval letter. What do you think about this property? What do you think about this price? Can my clients qualify? That's encouraging because we did have months in January and December where my phone was not ringing so much on a weekend. So I'm getting texts, I'm getting calls, I'm getting emails where there's a lot more activity. I was driving with a friend of mine yesterday, and I was on the phone the entire time. He's sitting there. I'm like, I'm going to have to take. That, yes. I told him ahead. By the way, he's in commercial real estate. He does the same thing. Okay. He can handle it. But I told him like, hey, I have a few calls coming. But yeah, it's an encouraging sign.
Well, and there's an interesting article that came across. You see these all the time, but it was about concessions and things you can negotiate. And last year, 24% of home buyers got concessions from sellers. That's actually down from the year before. It was like 33%, according to NAR. But it's basically 5 things you can negotiate when you buy a home, other than the price. Obviously, that's the mortgage rate and lender's fees. And you've talked about that. Do you want to add you mentioned float downs possibility? Any other products gaining traction now, or any other?
I think it's just important to be creative. We had a situation recently with a client where they're very tight with their assets. So having enough money for the down payment, the closing costs. So what we did was we recommended, and this is what they're ultimately going to do, is have the seller raise the price and get a credit back from them. So you're borrowing a higher percentage of the higher price and then getting a credit. It's somewhat of a loophole that allows them to put less money down or come out of pocket for less. Other things that are out there is just the float down policies, which we've talked about.
Is that a one-time float, or can they do it multiple times?
Typically, you're doing it one time.
One time.
It's important for people to also understand that there's a positive relationship between the amount of days you lock a rate in for and the rate itself. So if I lock a rate in for 60 days versus 30 days, the 30-day rate typically is going to be lower. So depending upon when someone's looking to close, we might, especially right now, if rates are kind of trending downward, we're not so much in a rush to lock someone in.
Right.
We'll play the market a little bit. And then if we get you within that striking distance of being 30 days before closing, we can potentially get 30-day pricing, which would be lower than 60-day pricing.
Well, and we have the Nadler rule that rates go up faster than they go down, but it's hard to see unless Friday's jobs report is a blow-away number. Like, it's hard to imagine that rates are going to start shooting up again. But
and this is where
possible.
It's really important. We have conversations with our clients all the time about this, but we can't get too greedy because, again,
remember when we finally thought we were only going down, and then September went into October, and then it all changed.
You can't get comfortable. Just when you think rates are, because we talk to clients who, look, they're living and breathing this for 2 months during the process of buying a home, where we live it all the time for years. So we see it. So when we're telling a client, hey, maybe now's a good time to lock it in, it's not because we have a crystal ball and we can see into the future. It's because you started at 7%, now rates are at 6.5%. Let's take advantage of that.
Yeah. And just so you know, a year ago, they were sitting just under 7%. So you're getting a lower rate than you did a year ago. You're getting a rate that's about 1% lower than the historical average over the last 50 years. Don't try to time a rate and a price because you can't do either.
Right.
You know, find a house you love. You trust me. Again, I bought in 2006. Bad time to buy. 6.5% mortgage rate, but that rate's significantly lower, and we love the house.
Yeah.
You know, that's the key thing. That's what stays with you, not the rate, because most people do not keep the same mortgage for 30 years.
Right.
Just to finish this list, because some of these are obvious. Home repairs, seller paid closing costs. Talked a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm.
Fixtures. There's an expression, if you turn your house upside down, wouldn't fall out, should stay with the house. It'd be cool to try that. And home warranties. So that, everything's negotiable. Talk to your real estate agent, talk to Scott Nadler or your mortgage professional. Again,
also,
get informed.
Timing is really important too, because we have a lot of instances where the buyer and seller's timelines have to line up. Some sellers want to close immediately. They want to get out of the place. They want to leave within 30 days. And as a buyer, you need to be able to accommodate that. Right. But there are other instances where we spoke to someone, who the sellers aren't looking to leave until October. They want to sell the home, but they don't want to vacate the property until October. So understanding both timelines is important and can help you when you are negotiating.
It is a logistical nightmare because I had that problem. My landlord was not being forthcoming and could we leave the lease a little early? What would we have to do that? And then the sellers wanted the right to rent the home from us while their home was being built. And that didn't suit us because I asked my attorney, he said, well, if they don't leave, then we have to go to court. I was like, and you're going to be paying on this house this is why you have professionals.
Right.
And this is why you have to have that knowledge. And it is a daunting thing, but just talk to anybody that's done it. They'll say, yeah, it's brutal, but then you get past it and you're going to forget all that stuff.
Right.
And, that's the key thing. All right, we have another break we have to take for this message, and we'll be right back with some tips.
What do you really need to know about buying or selling a home? First, it's serious business, and it's complicated. There's a lot of money on the table, and emotion too. You need an agent who knows the ropes. So, whether you're buying or selling your home, work with professionals who have a mastery of the craft.
And we're back. So sometimes I get these texts from Scott in the morning or emails or last night about
or 5 minutes before the show.
Yeah, or on his way into my office. And, we talk about ways to save money. And I'll preface this because an economist with an MBA is obsessed with stuff like this, that first of all, you have to get a handle on what you're spending. And a lot of people think they know what that means. And, you could try things as drastic as writing down everything you spend, which I made my wife do for a month, and she hated me every day of that month. There's a great book I read years ago called Your Money or Your Life that really has you categorize your spending, how much you spend, divide it by your hourly income to see how many hours you had to work to pay for those lattes or sandwiches or whatever, and it really puts in perspective. But, you mentioned something in your email, and this is a craze now, all these subscriptions and services, right, that we have that we don't even know we have.
Exactly. And I think it's important when you are looking at what you're spending, most people put most of their spending on one or two cards. So looking at your last 6 to 12 statements and just going through, it doesn't take that long. It feels like a daunting task, but going through it, maybe people just don't want to see what's actually in there. But going through that exercise, especially if you go over a 12-month period, you're going to see things that you're paying for that you might not use. And I mentioned that we do have the Nadler rule, but I have a Nadler theory about that.
This guy's
I just thought about this. There's a FOMO tax. So FOMO, fear of missing out, right? So people will pay for a Hulu subscription, let's say, whatever that is. I don't even know what it is. Let's say it's $14.99 a month, or $10.99 a month.
They bundle them, so you don't even know what each one individually costs.
But you're paying for that thinking that if a show comes out that everyone likes and wants to watch, I want to be there and be able to watch it. When in reality, maybe they're only watching 1 or 2 shows on that specific service. So people pay for things that they're not using because of having FOMO sometimes. They don't want to miss out on the opportunity.
Yeah.
So I know people who they have their regular gym membership, let's say, but then they're also paying for side classes to go to yoga or Pilates or spin or whatever it is. And they're really not using it all that much.
Right, right.
So I think it's really important, especially, we're talking about the economy. We're talking about how things are not as strong right now. I was mentioning to you personally, like I have a car in the city, so I'm paying for my car lease. I'm paying for the garage, insurance. This adds up. And I'm realizing that I'm really not using the car as much as I thought I would. I've had it for 2 years now. I'm really not using it that much. Could I get rid of that and just get some kind of Zip car membership or something with Enterprise or Avis? Maybe a potential sponsor. But I, looking at those types of things, I think it's important for everyone does this. It doesn't matter how much money you have. Everyone does this. Everyone will reevaluate.
I think it was in the book. You might like one of the things they tell you to do is to take stock of all your assets. Get your Social Security earnings statement. Look at how much money you've made. Then look at the value of the stuff you own.
Yeah.
Not that we're all going to calculate that, right? And realize how much money you may have wasted or been regretful for spending. And I think for anybody, we want to spend it on what we want to spend it on. And if we sign up for a streaming service that we just keep because we're too lazy to make phone call, just remember what our username and password is and go and cancel it. But a lot of these money management software and other sites will cancel stuff for you.
Right.
Sometimes they take a piece or they'll renegotiate it. That's another thing we fail to do. We don't think that things are negotiable, and they are.
Right.
Everything is negotiable. And as I tell my son all the time, the most they could say is no. And that's it. But yeah, those streaming subscriptions are the big cost. Gym memberships you don't use. And yeah, like you said, is
delivery services. I mean, taking Ubers or ordering Uber Eats or things of that nature. When if the weather gets a little bit better, you can walk outside and you can.
But like $5 a day for a cup of coffee or whatever you're spending doesn't sound like a lot until you multiply that by 30, and then you realize that you're getting maybe some satisfaction out of that. But is there a more economical way to do that?
Also, look,
is a coffee at work that bad that you can't drink it? Stuff like that. And then look, I like to buy guitars, because I like to play guitars. But I'm happy with that. What I don't like is when I look at stuff that I didn't touch. Right. And that happens. And it's hard to look. It's like looking at yourself in the mirror and taking stock of your appearance. That's, but only it's your financial appearance.
Right.
And it's like, why did I get that thing again? Like, what is that? Did we use that? And it's always exercise equipment is another thing that people regret. You know?
For sure.
I was thinking of getting a stationary bike, and my uncle's like, it's going to be a towel rack by next week.
Yep. I bought those like bands, like 8 different kinds of bands. I've never used them. Yeah. I just go to the gym.
Doesn't mean we should be fear of buying things, but I think we have to think about, the long-term value and use.
I think it was Rich Dad, Poor Dad. You've probably read that. I read that book, right? Yeah. I think in that book, he talks about how it's important to pay yourself first. And I think that's something else. And we had some great years in the mortgage business in 2020 and 2021. And I saw colleagues of mine, Greg, spending like you wouldn't believe, spending so much money on a lot of different stuff. Right. And now at a time where, or even last year or the year before, where things weren't as strong and their business really dipped, now they're forced to sell a lot of these assets at half the price, and they're struggling. So I think it's really important to make sure that when you do come into some money and things are going well, things aren't always going to be great forever. It's these things go in cycles. So it's important to save up, and
these are and planning. Things like life insurance. I'm at that age now where it's on people's minds. Looking at your homeowner's insurance, your auto insurance. Insurance is insurance. You may like your carrier, you may be with them a long time, but I just saved a lot of money. It's not like a commercial on my car insurance because I went to a broker and I got a much better deal and I have the same insurance. Mm-hmm. we're afraid to do it, I think, sometimes because it's like, do we know what we're doing? I don't have time. I'll do it later. But the feeling you get from being prepared, I always tell my son when he gets nervous for something, the way to combat that is to be prepared. And that means saving money at a young age. Start it as early as you can. You know, don't expect to be able to buy a home if you haven't saved for a down payment. You know, that takes time to plan. Listen to people that have done it. One of the things I do that, again, embarrasses my son is I'll ask people questions. Why? People have knowledge you don't. Why not? You know, to me, Steve Jobs is a big fan of that. Said the biggest mistake people make is not asking for help.
Right.
If if Scott's got his car, he's cruising around the city, I want to know how he's doing that.
Right.
Why am I not drinking in Barcelona? I'm doing something wrong. You know, I'm playing with bobbleheads here. Maybe that might be some of the problem.
You don't want to reinvent the wheel. People have done it. People have gone through this. And again, looking at it in good times and in bad times, like it's really important to set money aside. And we talk to people all the time right now who are buying homes, and some people who have backed out of the process because they don't feel great about the economy.
Right.
So it's like, all right, so how are you putting yourself in a position where in a year from now or 2 years from now, we're going to have a different conversation? You know, so I think it's not a fun thing. It's not a sexy thing to talk about, but it's like going to the doctor for your annual checkup.
Right. You know, it's another thing like lose weight, exercise. It's part of the whole thing. You know, my son will be going to college in September, and, you know, thankfully his college is paid for. You know, we started when he was just born, opened the 529 account. You know, I'm a huge fan of autopilot. You know, it may not be the highest way to get the highest returns you can get using some of these programs, but it's, you know, we've talked about the old Christmas club mentality. You wanted $500 for Christmas. 10 weeks you went in, you gave $50. You didn't get interest on it, but you had your $500 and you could buy your gifts. And with 529's the direct investment, when I first job was with the federal government, topic these days, but I had bonds taken out of my paycheck. Those bonds we used to buy stocks later. And, you know, you figure it out as you go along and you talk to people and you do what you're comfortable with.
How often do you think someone should do this financial checkup?
I mean, look, it's so easy, at least on an annual basis, because you can use any of these money apps, connect your accounts, and see your net worth and your position at any time.
All right, so let's say once a year.
They have budgetary tools in there too. And I think people think budgets, it's like it's going to be this strict thing, but, you know, and look at your spending. Really look at it. Look at your statements, because credit card companies do organize it by restaurants and auto repairs and stuff like that.
They make it easy for you, for sure.
They do, and you can categorize it yourself in the apps that you can get for not a lot of money and see. And it doesn't have to be this arduous process of like feeling like an accountant.
So let's say that people should do it once every year. If we took 100 random people, different ages, different income levels, what percentage or how many of those 100 right now do you think are looking at their finances on an annual basis?
5% probably.
You think it's 5%?
I think it's really low. I think it's something that a lot of people don't feel they understand. You know, I have a brother who's a doctor, and I don't understand medicine, but, you know, I try to eat right, exercise, and he doesn't understand money. So we try to talk about these things, but people would just say, I don't like numbers, or I don't want to think about that, or I'm putting money away.
Or they're afraid to know what the answer is.
Or they feel like they're not going to measure up to their siblings or their friends and everything. And I think people should be more open. I don't, you know, whether they're talking about your salary or the investments you have. People love to talk about the value of their home and how great that is.
Right.
But I think that the more information we can share, everybody benefits and learn from the lessons. You know, that as a parent, the biggest fear I have is my son repeating my mistakes. That's the one thing I should try the hardest on.
It's interesting.
Is like, don't do this, don't do that. And, you know, he's going to make his own mistakes anyway, and I'll be there to help him. But it starts with just a commitment to try better. And even if you don't get the results you want right away, at least if you get a handle on things. Plus, people live longer now. Estate planning becomes a lot more. I think, do I need long-term care insurance? Do I want to put money in a health savings account? How does that all add up? It's too much, and it is. But if you handle it one step at a time, like owning a home, am I going to do the kitchen? Do I do the siding and the windows? You know, Does the house have to be rewired? How much can we afford? You can get these answers. You just have to, the more in control and preemptive you are, the more confident and easier it's going to be to go through with this stuff and realize that, yes, there are certain things in life that are taking chances.
There are also, we're living in a time right now where there's so many different options of where you can put your money.
Yeah.
I mean, crypto is big. Obviously, there are many different.
Well, now we have a crypto reserve. So those currencies have had a nice couple of 24 hours now of gains. But again, do you have the stomach for that?
Exactly.
Is that the right view? There are too many choices out there.
Yep.
But you can always go with index funds. Just understand what you're buying.
Yeah.
If someone can't explain it to you in a way you can understand, you probably want to look somewhere else.
Yep.
Agreed. Well, that is our message of hope. Hopefully you stuck around for it and hopefully it works. If you have any suggestions you'd like us to share with the viewers and listeners, ctl@bhsusa.com. We'd be happy to do that. We're going to have a jobs report to digest next week. That's going to be a huge thing on Friday. And, every week is a new week. So who knows what's going to happen. But we'll be here to try to tell you what we think about it. And again, thanks to Scott Nadler for being on the show, and to Ray and Lena, and to all our sponsors, and to all of you again for supporting the show. We're humbled every week with the amount of listeners and downloads we get. And we're just going to keep doing it as long as you let us. So we look forward to crossing the line again with you next week. Have a great week, everybody.